Everyone knows that lessons are the key to getting better at golf, right? Right? I've definitely had some lessons that did not move me forward. In fact, they kind of moved me in the wrong direction. And it was so frustrating. Like, the money was a problem, but man, just so much time trying to make this thing work, and it just was not going to work. That's years of my life I can't have back. Now, we all have limited time, energy, money, and youth to spend on golf. So it's important that every lesson moves us as far as possible, as fast as possible. And so in this video, I'll talk about the 3 keys to maximizing your return on investment from lessons. And if you've got some stuff that just isn't working for you, we're also going to talk about some quick fixes that hopefully will revive that and get you back on track ASAP. Hey, what's up? I'm Manu, and welcome to the Whiteboard of Wonderful Wisdom, which is like my version of Wilson from Castaway. Everyone loves Wilson. All right, with that, let's move on to topic number 1 for maximizing your ROI from coaching, which is all about picking a good coach. Now, there's a famous line that the most important factor in a relationship is selection. And so obviously, selection. The first thing I look for in a good coach is someone who has a vocabulary that works for you. Now, we've all had that aha moment where someone said something and it like totally clicked and we're like, wow, that was amazing. That's what we want from our coach. It means if you want to be technical, find someone technical. Personally, I like things explained to me in crayon, so I look for someone who explains things in crayon. Now, whatever it is, remember that you are the customer, and then after this conversation with the coach, you're gonna have to go and replicate this when you're not being watched by the coach. So the more you understand, the better off you'll be. And the way to figure this out is really pretty straightforward. Call them, talk to them beforehand if you can, and just get an idea for how they speak. Do they say things that you understand? When you ask clarifying questions, do they repeat what they just said, or do they say it in a slightly different way so you can understand it better? And that leads us to our next criteria for finding a good coach, which is making sure that you have aligned incentives. Now, unfortunately, the way this whole system works is it's kind of the incentives aren't aligned, because our outcome from getting lessons is to get really good so that we don't need lessons. And generally for a lot of coaches, the goal is to keep offering lessons. So there can be a little kind of imbalance here, and that's why it's important to like find out what the person's incentives are. So I have a few different points here. Let me go through them one by one. The first is what I call being coin operated. I've had a couple of coaches now. One I remember specifically where, he gave me a tip and I was working on it and we still had some time left in the lesson. So I said, okay, well, what do we work on after this? And he said, next lesson. I was like, bro, that's another $200. You could just tell me now and, I'll still come back and do it. But this whole model of, put money in, get one tip out, I call that being coin operated. And it's just a tough place to be. So the way I like to think about it and the way what I look for from my coaches, and it's the discussion I had with my coach before I started working with him, was I will come back to you regularly because I want to get better and better and better. But you need to tell me the context. You need to tell me kind of what to look forward to and what I'm building towards. Now, I'll caveat here, sometimes we don't know what the next step is going to be, right? Because if you're going early enough in the swing to make a change, you may not necessarily know what the next issue will be, because once you make this change, everything else will shift. However, your coach should still be open to explaining that to you and saying, hey, look, when we fix your takeaway, XYZ is going to happen. And because that's going to happen, I don't know if you're going to have to fix this or this. So they should still be able to give you some kind of context to what else is happening, as opposed to just being like, put money in, get one tip out, come back for another lesson and do it again. Another big flag for me when it comes to incentives is when someone talks about a complete overhaul. For a lot of us, sometimes it feels like, yeah, I need a complete overhaul because like my swing feels totally out of whack, or I look at it on camera and it just doesn't look pretty, all these things, right? And we do that because the brain tends to think that the more effort you put in, the better results you get out. But that's not always true. Like, what if you're putting effort in the wrong direction? That's not gonna work. And also, it feels cool at the beginning where you're like, complete overhaul. It really sucks when you're in the middle of that complete overhaul. So a better solution is maybe there's just a minor tweak that will get you significant results. Like the way I think about it is, the golf swing is a bit of a chain reaction. So it's really hard to be in a good position here if you were not in a good position just a little bit before that. And so what if you just made a tweak here? Would it potentially fix everything else? So there's always a possibility that you don't need a complete overhaul. So anyone who's trying to start with, we need to do a complete overhaul, that raises definitely some red flags for me. Along with someone recommending that I need a $3,000 lesson package, which I've had happen to me before. And I was like, really? That sounds like a lot. And if you're really saying it's going to take me 30 lessons to get better, A, what does that say about your coaching? And B, how do you know it's going to take 30 lessons? Maybe it takes 2, maybe it takes 100. Trying to sell me like a very large lesson package as I'm just getting started, that to me is a bit of a red flag, because it sounds to me like you're in it for different incentives than what I'm in it for. I think really good coaches understand that real value doesn't come from like super long-term students who just come back to you every week over and over. It comes from referrals, because everything can grow a lot faster. I mean, I've referred a ton of people to my coach. I think it's a way better way to grow versus me getting like an extra, 3 or 4 lessons, 5 lessons a year. When you think about incentives, the simple way to figure out making sure the incentives are aligned is just to tell them what your incentives are. And so for me, I like to have a conversation first that says, hey, look, my goal is to understand the swing and to get better significantly or as quickly as possible. That means I'd like to get multiple tips per session, whatever we're talking about. Maybe you can tell me more from a contextual perspective, like how this all fits in the swing, etc., so I can understand this better. And if they say, oh, I don't know if I agree with that, whatever, or we only do the giant lesson packages, then maybe I go somewhere else. Obviously, your mileage may vary. Maybe this is something you really like. Oh, the caveat I have to throw in here for the $3,000 lesson package is if this is something that's important to you, if you want to go every week and have someone look at your swing, that's fine. You should absolutely do that. The way I look at it is if you're telling me it's going to take me, 10 or 15 or 20 lessons to get better, because that's just how long you've decided it's going to take me to get better, that's a bit of a red flag for me. And then we move on to the third part of this, which is all about their approach. And I've already written kind of the first piece in here, but overall, let's talk about their approach for a second. The coach's approach rhymes. Could be a rapper. Is very, very important. I think it's really important to find someone who, and let's start with this one, tries to get to the root cause of what the problem is. Now, unfortunately, as amateurs, what we want is like, oh, my hips aren't turning, and I really want to create power on this one point. But if you're a good coach, often they'll understand that the reason you're not creating power at this point is because in the step before that, and the step before that, and the step before that, you weren't in the right place to be able to create power at this point. And so what they'll do is they'll kind of trace it back to what that root cause was. Now, often that root cause starts with the setup, and the setup is not sexy. I mean, I really, it feels bad almost going to the coach and being like, here's a whole bunch of money. Now tell me that my grip sucks. But it actually works. Quick example here, if you think about it, PGA players spend so much time setting up to the ball. If you watch any tournament, you'll notice all of them. There are very few of them who don't spend time on setup, maybe like 1 or 2, but the majority of them spend a lot of time getting set up. They're really solid. All that stuff really matters to them. Now, obviously, we have availability bias because we don't see how much time they spend on working on the downswing. But it is an indicator to me that if they're spending this much time on the setup in a tournament when time is important, clearly it's very important. And let's talk a little bit more about the setup just very quickly. Think about anything that you are good at outside of golf, something that you're really good at. Now, for me, that is making slides, for better or for worse. I make a lot of slides. I made a lot of slides in my life. I'm pretty good at making slides. Now, when I was learning how to make slides, I thought that formatting and fonts and, making them look pretty was the most important thing. Now that I'm pretty good at it, and I do it for a living, I know that none of that stuff really matters. What matters is what are you saying and who are you saying it to? And if you're really, really good, you won't actually need any slides because you'll be so crisp with what you're saying that you'll be able to explain it. Maybe you'll be so good you need a whiteboard. That was a terrible joke. Let's move on. But the point is, if you think about what you're really good at, and you go back to what are the core things that you would explain to somebody else about how to get good at that thing, my guess is those will be like the root cause things, like the setup in the swing. And so when you go to a good coach, if they help you really nail that setup and get it in such a way that you can repeat it over and over and over again, you should really reward them. You should stick with them because that, I think, is going to be a real valuable thing for you in the long term. The second key point when it comes to approach is being able to have a coach who explains to you the context of what they're doing. Because as I mentioned in one of my other videos, I'll link it up here, we are the owners of our swings, and the only way we can do that is if we understand how they all work together. So a good coach is someone who actually has an approach where they explain to you how it all fits together. So that allows you to start understanding, okay, for my body and the things that I'm doing and the way that I'm doing them, maybe I have like tight hips, maybe I have like a stiff whatever leg or whatever, whatever you have, right? In that context, the way I'm making this work is by doing this. And that context is what they're going to have to provide you with. So definitely check with them. And if you need, you can just ask clarifying questions. Ask them why. Understand this better. If they're able to explain all of this to you in a framework, holy grail. That is the best place to be. The other great value of understanding this is that you are able to self-correct when they're not around. I mean, at some point, probably, hopefully, you are going to go home and your coach is no longer going to be there watching you swing. And so you're going to need to figure out when what you're doing is working and when it's not working, and then how to fix it. Now, a bunch of coaches usually show you the feels. Good coaches will show you the feels that you're looking for, right? A lot of us are feel-oriented players, but along with those feels, you should also be looking for cues that you can use to replicate those feels every time. Because I know there's been a ton of times I've been, there with my coach and I'm holding the club and he's like, oh, if you know how this feels, I'm like, yeah, I know how this feels. Yeah, okay, this is what I am. And I'm trying to remember that feeling. That feeling is gone before I've moved on to like the next bay as this next student comes up. And so understanding different cues of like, oh, how do I create this feeling? Where does my arm sit? Where does my leg feel? Well, where does my leg like land? Where's the weight in my leg? Et cetera, that's really important. And so what I'm looking for from the approach of my coach, rhyming, is, I should stop that one. What I'm looking for is really this ability to understand the overall context so I can own my swing, but also understand the cues that will allow me to self-correct. So I don't go away, forget about all this stuff, and then I come back, 6 weeks, a month, 2 months, 6 months later with the exact same problem over and over again. And the way to figure out what their approach is you ask them. Not that complicated. This all comes back to the first one. When you call them, tell them what you're looking for, and ask them about how they usually do stuff. And hopefully you'll also be able to understand whether their vocabulary is something that you get. That's just part one. Let's talk about the second big key to getting maximum ROI, which is all about being a good student. Flashbacks of school? I'm just kidding. Now, earlier I said that the most important factor in the success of a relationship is selection. That's true. And a key part of that is selecting what part of yourself you bring to that relationship. So with your golf coach, imagine if you're going to a golf lesson and you're nervous, you're going to get a different outcome versus if you were suspicious, or if you were like a know-it-all, which I've met plenty of those people. We're going to get different outcomes. And so who we choose to be in that relationship with the golf coach is definitely going to affect our results. So there's 3 different points of this. Let's talk about them. The first I just talked about, which is the I know version of ourselves, right? And we all get in this mode sometimes. Sometimes you're adamant about this is how I am, like my identity. I know I can do this. I know I can't do that. Maybe that's one way to look at it. The other one is I know all this stuff about the golf swing. Let me tell you about, I know all this stuff. Oh, I know that. I know that. I know that. For both of those, might be useful to just kind of put that on pause a little bit for this conversation, because sometimes like, I know this about me, I know this about me, it makes us feel safe because it puts us in a box. But the walls that protect you are also the walls that imprison you, especially like on the golf course with the things you can do. So sometimes getting a little too into like, I know this about me, I know this about me, it can create barriers to growth. So maybe just suspend disbelief for the next little while and just be open to like all these possibilities that might be there. So generally the way I think about it is I'm going to create a small summary of what I'm looking for, where I'm at, etc. I might tell you like, hey, this is how I play. This is what I usually do. This is my usual misses. This is what I'm trying to fix, but I'm open to you seeing what I'm doing and then see where we can go from there. Maybe don't get too caught up in like creating a lot of rigid boxes or barriers about exactly what you need. Let them tell you. And so a great way to be is to be more relaxed. Now, personally, when I'm about to go for a lesson, I always get very excited because I'm going to learn all this stuff. It's going to be so exciting. Every single time I get very excited about it. Now, sometimes that excitement leads me to be kind of like all over the place. And so I'm not fully in the moment and understanding what's going on and able to create more of like a full contextual awareness of what's happening, how it's all working. It can feel like a little bit of a whirlwind. Also, you're often on the clock. And so, you're there, you're learning these 2 things and suddenly your time's up. A better way to maybe be more present and more aware and get a lot more out of the lesson is to take a breath. Enjoy the excitement, let go of the nervousness, recognize the nervousness and excitement are the exact same thing. You just have to frame it differently. Something we'll talk about more another time. Before you get into this lesson, take 15 seconds. It won't take you very long. Take a deep breath, relax, visualize the end of the lesson, and imagine you're in a place where you're like, wow, this was amazing. I learned so much and I'm so excited about how great this is going to be for my game, how great this is going to be for my swing. And what that does is it gives your mind something to focus on, which is a positive outcome, and allows you to kind of relax a little bit. And then when you walk in, nice and slow, keep breathing, and that will allow you to actually get way more out of it because you'll be able to remember a lot more coming from a relaxed place. And the third part of being a good student is recognizing that simple answers are really good. And often they're pretty hard to identify. The thing that, or like I said earlier, our brains like to think that like more effort equals better outcomes. So the more complicated, fix might be, like the better it is because I'll make all these changes, etc. I found the opposite. The simpler the fixes, the faster you can put them into play, the better results you end up getting because they're easier to replicate over and over again. And actually, there's a story that I think about pretty often. I'll share it with you here. It's called The Engineer and the Screw. It's about this company that has this really fancy machine that makes them millions of dollars a day, and one day it breaks down. And no one can fix it until someone's like, hey, I know this old engineer who's really good at these things. So they bring him in and he walks around the machine once, just looking at it, doesn't touch anything, hands behind him. Then he's like, yeah, you guys are missing a screw right here. I can fix that for you. And the CEO's like, yeah, we're losing $1 million a day. Like, let's do it. So he goes to his truck, gets a screw, screws in the screw, machine starts working. And CEO goes, how much do I owe you? And he's like, $10,000. The CEO's like, for a screw? And he's like, I'll itemize that for you if you want. And so the engineer writes out this invoice and it says, screw, $1. Knowing where to put the screw, $9,999. And so I think of that a lot because that, I think, is what you're looking for from a good coach. You want someone who can see exactly what's going on, and if the simpler they can make the outcome, the better off you'll be. I say this because I see a lot of people who are like, I need to work on my hip turn, my hands are doing this, whatever. Good coaches will be able to tell you what we talked about earlier on, is they'll get to the root cause piece of like, oh, the reason this is happening is because, coming back to the beginning, when you were here, you didn't do this one tiny thing. And that brings us to our third key of what to do to maximize ROI from a lesson, which is what to do during and after the lesson. And the first one of these is pretty straightforward. Now, not every coach will allow you to do this, but you can ask, hey, look, I'm not going to put this stuff online, and I just need like these specific points filmed as much as possible. Ideally, you'll have a coach who'll be able to film a lot of it. So my coach films like my swings and he explains, gives me little voiceovers, etc. And the reason they're really valuable is because now I know what to do and I can remember what he was talking about when I'm working on it on my own. There's a famous line like a blunt pencil is better than the sharpest memory. Film is even better. So as much as you can do this, and please, obviously, this is people's livelihood, so don't put it all up for free online because that'll hurt them and they probably won't want you back. The second thing that you want from the lesson, ideally, is a good action plan from your coach that tells you what to work on, in what sequence, and most importantly, how will you know if it's working? So hopefully at the end of every lesson or during every lesson, your coach should be giving you a very clear action plan of how to implement this, and how you know it's working. Maybe you even film it. Who knew? And now when you get home and you're working on these things, I think one thing that's really important is to suspend judgment. So ideally, first you're working on this on the range before you take it to the course. And when you do decide to take it to the course for the first time, make working on that swing change or whatever thing you're working on the number one priority, not shooting a low score. Because I've done this a lot, I'm sure you have too. Trying to make changes and shoot a low score don't really go well together, and they're just going to lead to like being unhappy. The more you kind of judge yourself for things not moving fast enough, etc., the more you lose confidence, and then you end up in a bit of a doom spiral. It's not a good place to be. So don't do that. Just be kind to yourself for a little while. The reason I've got 2 to 1 here is because if you've read about System 1 and System 2 thinking, it's very interesting, very useful. I'll make a video about it at some point, but especially in golf, it's really important. So at the beginning, System 2 is all about like the intelligent cognitive mind that thinks through things. But if I asked you, like what's 75 times 14 at the same time that I asked you to like make a swing change, you wouldn't be able to do both of those because both of those require you to use your cognitive mind. But if I asked you to do, 75 times 14 while you're, say, driving a car, which for a lot of people with System 1, it's just kind of automatic now, it's a lot easier to do because it's simple. So System 1 is the automatic, kind of back of the mind. It's all automatically happening. Like sometimes you drive home, you don't even know how you got home, but you're like, I drove and I followed the rules of the road and I'm here now. That's System 1. So when you get home and you're working on things, it's going to take time before they move from System 2 thinking to System 1 thinking. And during that period, you need to suspend judgment. The same thing applies, by the way, for swing thoughts, because when you're actively thinking about a swing thought, cognitive mind. Sometimes, like when you get used to that swing thought, or generally when you get used to that swing thought over time, it starts becoming System 1. It's a lot easier to do. And so that's when you can start measuring how successful it's been. Prior to that, give yourself a little bit of a break. It'll just be better for everybody. And finally, this is a really topical one that, we wouldn't have talked about a few years ago, but now super duper important. So I highly recommend using AI after you come home from your lesson, just because it'll just enhance your experience overall. You can ask a few simple questions to get to the goals that we talked about overall, right? So the first is you could tell it, hey, this is what my coach told me to work on. Can you explain it to me in different ways? Or how would Butch Harmon explain this? Or how would Tiger explain this? Or I would insert favorite golfer here, right? Explain this. And so just getting AI to explain things to you in different ways will help you kind of understand it and make more sense of it overall. And then the second great question you can ask AI is, why does this matter for the overall swing? So again, we're coming back to understanding how to own the swing and create context for everything. For what I've seen most recently, it's actually been pretty accurate. At the beginning, it was not so great. If you want, you can double check it, ask Gemini and ChatGPT, and then you can triangulate and see what works for you. And then the third thing you can do in terms of your action plan is, these are the drills I got. Are there any other easy drills I can do? Maybe 1 or 2 really impactful drills that I can do to generate the same kind of result that I'm looking for. So AI will actually be like a fantastic partner for you. I am pretty sure we're all going to be playing golf with a robot at some point in the future, or maybe we'll be caddying for our robot overlords, who knows. But in any case, today, in the heyday that we have, let's use AI to make the most out of what's happening after the lesson. And here we are at the quick fixes section, say that fast, where we'll talk about like maybe you've already had some lessons, but it hasn't been, or they haven't been yielding the results that you expected. So let's talk about a few different quick fixes. But before we get into this, just a quick request from you. If this video is useful, you're finding it helpful, could you let me know, maybe with a comment, smash or gently nudge that like button so you don't break your computer. I understand my jokes need to get better. We're working on that. There's an entire team of me working on this as we speak. But in any case, please let me know. All the engagement helps. Yeah, okay, let's keep going. Enough sales pitch. Let's get on to quick fix number 1, which is asking about whether something is a root cause. And so this is probably the number 1 thing that I see when I work with people is what you're working on actually the root cause, or are you working on something like further downstream that was caused by something else? And let me give you a really simple example. A lot of people have problems with, they're trying to fix their hands flipping. Now, the reason your hands are flipping is because you have no space. And so the way I think about it is your hands are often flipping, often, not always, not 100%, but often they're flipping because they need to flip in order for you to hit the ball. And so the question is, where were you before that got you into a place where your hands had to flip to hit the ball? And so maybe instead of like trying to hold your hands steady instead of flipping them, you look at it from the perspective of my hands are having to flip because of the way that I'm doing the other stuff in the swing. And so like a really simple example for the hands flipping piece, example of an example, is maybe you're not getting your weight to your side, to your right side. I'm a right-handed golfer. You're not getting your weight to your right side. And because you're not getting your weight to your right side, it stays on your left. Your hands have to flip because there's no space for your body to shift the weight over. And so a simple answer to this is what we had here earlier is ask AI. You're like, hey, this is the problem I'm having. I'm trying to do this, but are there any points earlier in the swing that I need to be hitting that could be causing this problem, and so I can't fix it? So that's just a really simple example with that, similar with early extension, etc. Right? Often the problems for those parts of the swing are caused by things that we do much, much earlier in the swing. And since we're here, I'll throw out one more example, which is a really common one I see, which is when people set up, often their weight's on their toes. Now, the reason that happens is because you set up normally, comfortably, etc., and then you reach forward and the weight's on your toes, or you try to be athletic and so your weight's on your toes. Now, the issue is because your weight's on your toes, your body's going to work super hard to keep you stable and your weight's going to be all over the place. So trying to fix your hands on your downswing comes as like a 3rd or 4th priority of the body versus like making sure you're actually stable so you're not falling over during the swing. The hand flipping piece is more of a result of what's happening with the weight on your toes. So an easy fix there, similarly like topping the ball, etc., could all just be coming from weight on your toes. So ask AI. AI should hopefully triangulate it, but ask AI. Hopefully AI will help you and you really get to like the root cause of what problem is that you're actually trying to solve. The second thing that I think is a really important quick fix is understanding whether something is system 2 or if it's become system 1 yet. And this is a really valuable one when it comes to like pre-shot routine type stuff, mental thought stuff, basically, right? So even when you take a new swing thought to the course, like I said earlier, it's going to be very much like a mentally heavy thing. And so if you have this much space in your mind and you're trying to insert a new thought, something's got to fall off, right? Because there's only so much room on the wagon. And so while those things are system 2, you're not going to get the results that you expect. And so a really good example of this is the pre-shot routine. The first time you change a pre-shot routine, you try to create a new pre-shot routine, etc., you are going to not play well. It's very unlikely you will play well if you have made a number of big changes to try to get the pre-shot routine, because your brain is so focused on the pre-shot routine, it's much less focused on delivering the ball to the target. That's okay. That's really normal. It happens to everybody. I spent a long time continuously changing my pre-shot routine because I'm like, man, this just doesn't work. No, it was still system 2. So give yourself a little bit of a break. I told you about this earlier with like the judgment piece. Suspend judgment for a little while and recognize that like maybe it's not that you're not making progress. Maybe it's the progress you're making is the thing is slowly moving from system 2 to system 1, because this is not a binary situation. You might notice it as a binary situation where like one day everything just starts to click and happens automatically, but it's going to move, it's going to take some time to move from system 2 to system 1. And the third quick fix is making sure that you're hitting the other prerequisites in the swing. So when I say prerequisites, there is a bunch of other checkpoints you need to hit the ball well. So for example, if you have a good takeaway, but you're not executing a good hip turn, I mean, that good takeaway is great, but the hip turn is probably the thing that's blocking you. But if you're working on the takeaway, then you might be judging yourself on, oh, this isn't working because it's not system one yet, or it's not the root cause, etc. When it might be that there's a different part of your swing that isn't working so well. So again, coming back to that, really understanding context, I keep pointing to this because it was right here, but really understanding the context and like owning your swing so you can start seeing like the other parts that are happening. And you'll notice this as you start playing, as you start making changes, you'll notice when you change one thing, because everything's connected, other things will also change, which is great. Sometimes you end up in a virtuous cycle where you change one thing and everything falls into place and you shoot 7 under and life's great. Other times you might, fix one thing and break something else. So it's really important to make sure that you're hitting all the right checkpoints. And in my opinion, there's really like 3 really important checkpoints you have to hit. And every good swing has these 3 checkpoints. And you should find out more about those in this video right here. And tell me what you think about it. Again, I'd love any kind of comment or feedback to know whether this is working. Cool, well, I hope this was helpful. I hope you maximize your value from the next time you get a lesson, and hopefully I'll see you again soon. Cheers, bye.